I leaned back in my leather office chair, the city skyline stretching beyond my window like a glittering promise. My silk blouse felt impossibly smooth under my fingertips, but even the luxury couldn't mask the ache buried beneath the surface. A buzz on my phone startled me. Another meeting request, another urgent email. I swiped it open and froze. It was from my old boss, the one who had once said I'd never amount to anything. Funny how life circles around. For a moment, I just stared out at the city, feeling the cold glass against my palms. The office smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor as I stood to stretch. Pride and irony tangled in my chest. They had laughed at my ambition, dismissed my ideas, told me I was too soft to lead. And now my face stared back at me from the cover of Forbes, the words beneath my photo spelling out what they refused to believe. CEO. I caught my reflection in the glass, a composed woman, poised, unstoppable. But no one knew the sleepless nights, the tears, the moments of doubt that had built the woman staring back at them. Taking a deep breath, I tapped the reply button, fingers hovering over the keyboard. This conversation was inevitable, and I knew I had to confront the past on my terms. 5 years ago, I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table in my cramped apartment, staring at a rejection email that felt like a punch to the gut. My dream job, the one that could finally validate all those late nights and sacrifices, was gone. My hands shook as I crumpled the printout, and I felt that familiar lump in my throat, the one that rose every time someone I trusted dismissed me. I remembered the words vividly. "You're too inexperienced. Maybe leadership isn't for everyone." My father's sigh of disappointment echoed in my mind, his eyes silently asking why I couldn't just settle, why I had to push so hard. And my boss, God, how he had laughed. That laugh. I could still feel the sting. But that evening, sitting on the worn-out kitchen chair, I reached for the small silver locket my grandmother had given me. She had pressed it into my hands months before, saying, "Inside this, you carry your courage. Don't let anyone tell you who you can or cannot be." I opened it and traced the tiny engraving with my fingertip, feeling a flicker of hope amid the hurt. I made a choice that night. I refused to be the woman who bowed to their doubts. I would carve my own path, even if it meant standing alone, even if the world doubted me at every step. I called a mentor I had met years earlier, a woman in finance who had quietly recognized my potential. Her voice was firm yet kind. "I see your fire," she said. "Now, let's make it unstoppable." The next morning, I packed my few belongings, closed the door to my tiny apartment, and stepped into the unknown. The sting of rejection remained, but it was transformed into resolve. Every step I took after that was deliberate, each one a declaration. I would not just survive. I would thrive. That locket stayed with me, a symbol of the courage I carried forward, a secret reminder that even when the world said no, I could still say yes, to myself, to my dreams, to the life I was determined to build. I still remember the first day I walked into my mentor's office, a tiny space lined with books and awards, the smell of leather and coffee mingling in the air. She looked at me like she could see straight through to my ambitions, past the fear that I carried like a shadow. "You're ready," she said simply. And in that moment, I believed her. The early months were brutal. I juggled 2 part-time jobs while taking evening classes, learning the language of finance and business strategy as if my life depended on it, because it did. I spent countless nights hunched over spreadsheets in the dim light of my apartment, coffee cups stacked like small monuments to my determination. Self-doubt whispered in the quiet hours, reminding me of every no I had ever heard. But I clutched my locket, feeling the engraved words, and I kept going. My first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A small client who had dismissed me initially, now offering a modest contract after seeing my persistence. I remember the way my hands trembled as I signed the papers, the thrill of independence coursing through me. From there, one small victory led to another. The first profitable sale. The first recommendation from a respected industry leader. Slowly, my reputation began to grow. I learned to navigate the subtle biases that women in leadership often face. Meetings where my ideas were dismissed, only to be praised when echoed by a male colleague. Invitations ignored, suggestions minimized. Each time, I adapted, not by shrinking but by sharpening my skills, by learning when to speak and when to let results speak for themselves. Through it all, I kept my success hidden from my family and the people who doubted me. My social media was carefully curated, modest, and unassuming. Only a few trusted friends knew the full scope of my achievements. It was my secret garden, a place where I nurtured my growth away from judgment and expectation. A mentor once told me, "The world doesn't decide your worth, your actions do." I clung to that mantra. I built a network of allies who respected my talent, women and men who recognized capability over gender. Each late night, each rejected opportunity turned into fuel, shaping the woman who would one day stand in a high-rise office overlooking the city, face calm, mind sharp, and heart quietly triumphant. By the time I reached my mid-30s, I had quietly acquired enough to start my own company, a venture that combined my expertise with my vision for leadership. I had done it on my own terms, learning from every mistake, celebrating every small win in private before moving on to the next challenge. I had become the CEO I was told I could never be, though no one outside my inner circle knew it yet. It was liberating, intoxicating even, to know that my power was mine alone. The world hadn't given it to me. I had claimed it. And that knowledge, solid, unwavering, quietly roaring inside me, was more satisfying than any accolade, more enduring than any recognition. The moment finally arrived on a crisp Thursday morning. My parents and my old boss were coming to visit the office, convinced they'd see the same struggling, uncertain woman they'd known years ago. They stepped into the lobby, their expressions a mix of curiosity and subtle skepticism. I waited, letting the seconds stretch, allowing them to take in the space I had created from nothing. My office reflected every step of my journey. Expensive, yet not ostentatious. Large windows framed the skyline, and sunlight pooled on the dark wood floors. Art lined the walls, pieces I'd chosen not for show, but for the way they inspired me during long nights of work. Bookshelves were filled with carefully selected volumes that had shaped my thinking. And in the center, behind the sleek desk, sat me, calm, poised, exuding the quiet confidence of someone who had fought for every inch of ground she stood on. They looked around, eyes widening. My mother's hand hovered near her mouth, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. My father, usually so composed, shifted uneasily on his feet. And then there was him, my former boss, the man who once laughed at my ambition. His gaze flicked between the office, the awards on the wall, the framed articles highlighting my achievements, and finally, to me. I smiled. Not a triumphant, gloating smile, just a calm, self-assured one. "Welcome," I said softly, my voice carrying the weight of years of struggle and triumph. "I imagine you expected to see someone else." Their disbelief was palpable. I could see it in their eyes, feel it in the silence that hung heavy between us. They had prepared for weakness, for excuses, for failure. Instead, they met a woman who had not only survived but thrived. I gestured to the framed cover of Forbes on the wall. "CEO," I said, letting the word linger. "This is the company I built, the team I lead, the vision I bring to life every day. And yes," I continued, eyes meeting my former bosses, "I'm on the cover of Forbes, the very magazine you told me I'd never reach." Shock rippled across their faces. My mother's eyes glistened, not with tears yet, but with a sudden realization of the gap between their perception and reality. My father's jaw tightened, the unspoken guilt etched into every line of his face. My old boss looked defeated. Disbelief and shame battled in his eyes, though I detected a flicker of admiration beneath it. I let the moment stretch, allowing the truth to settle fully before saying another word. It wasn't enough to tell them. I wanted them to see it, to understand that this woman, the one they had underestimated, had claimed her place in the world, entirely on her own terms. And then, finally, I added with quiet authority, I did it because I believed in myself when no one else did. And that belief hasn't just built a company, it's built me. Their reactions were raw, unfiltered. The room was charged with emotion. Awe, shame, regret, astonishment. For the first time, I saw them not as critics or doubters, but as witnesses to a transformation they had once thought impossible. The air in the room felt charged, heavy with the tension of expectations overturned. I finally leaned forward on my desk, resting my hands lightly on the polished surface. Now that we've all seen the reality, I began, my voice calm but firm, let's talk about what comes next. I could see the hesitation in their eyes, shock still mingling with unspoken questions, but I didn't let them fill the silence. Power, I realized, was not just about achievement, it was about the ability to define terms, to set boundaries. And I intended to do exactly that. Mom, I said, first meeting her gaze, I want you to pursue your passion for painting again. You set aside your dreams to raise me, but it's time you create for yourself. I'll support you, but only if you commit to it fully. No excuses. Her lips trembled, a mixture of fear and hope, but she nodded. Turning to my father, I continued, you have a tendency to doubt before you act. I want you to mentor someone in your field, to pass on your knowledge. But you'll need to let go of criticism and judgment. Support, not control. His shoulders stiffened, but I saw the spark of understanding ignite. Finally, my former boss. He looked ready to argue, but I held his gaze steady. You once laughed at me, dismissed me. You will acknowledge the talent in others, give credit where it's due, and no longer belittle ambition. If you follow these rules, you can collaborate with my company, but only if you truly change. His eyes flickered between defiance and realization. I could sense him weighing his pride against the opportunity for redemption. Every condition I laid down was tied to growth, not punishment. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was offering a path for healing. I wanted them to understand that my power didn't come from spite. It came from clarity, from discipline, from self-respect. And if they wanted to step back into my life, they needed to step into that understanding as well. I care about each of you, I said softly, letting warmth thread through my authority. But I will no longer bend to old patterns, to past behaviors that diminished me. You get one chance to rise to this. Prove it. The room fell silent again, this time with the weight of reflection. I could see my mother's eyes shining with unshed tears, my father shifting from guilt to resolve, my former boss's jaw tightening as he considered the magnitude of what I offered. For the first time, I felt the full scope of my own authority, not just over my business but over my life, my choices, and my boundaries. The woman who had once been underestimated was now steering not just her destiny, but also guiding the change in those who had once doubted her. And in that moment, I realized that empowerment wasn't just about achieving success. It was about shaping the environment around you, setting standards, and ensuring that those you care about grow alongside you, without compromising your own worth. Weeks passed, and I watched quietly as change unfolded. My mother had set up a small studio in our home, her canvases filled with vibrant colors that spoke of rediscovered joy. My father had taken on a mentee at his firm, guiding someone with patience and encouragement instead of critique. Even my former boss had begun attending leadership workshops, slowly shedding the arrogance that once defined him. I observed their transformations with a sense of quiet pride, knowing that the conditions I had set were not punishments, they were invitations. They were learning to evolve, to step into their own potential, just as I had. And in watching them grow, I felt the last threads of resentment and hurt dissolve. One evening, I held the small silver locket from my grandmother, now worn and tarnished at the edges. I traced the engraving with my finger and smiled. The words she had spoken years ago, "Inside this, you carry your courage," had carried me through every rejection, every doubt, every lonely night of effort. That same courage had led me to the cover of Forbes, to the office I had built, to the life I had claimed entirely on my own terms. Looking out at the city skyline, I felt a profound sense of closure. The pain I had endured had shaped me, yes, but it had not defined me. I had taken every setback and turned it into a stepping stone, every dismissal into a declaration of my worth. I was no longer the girl they underestimated. I was a woman who had become the architect of her own destiny. I touched the locket one last time and whispered to myself, a smile playing at my lips. I believed in myself when no one else did, and that belief will always be enough. As I turned back to my desk, the city lights reflecting in the glass, I felt a calm power settle over me. I had faced the past, transformed it, and stepped fully into the life I was meant to lead. The journey had been long and painful, but every step had been worth it. And in that moment, I knew this truth. I was unstoppable, not because of recognition or titles, but because I had claimed my life with courage, grace, and unwavering self-respect.